Mate, put it up. She's speaking.
Thank you so much. I think that gave us a real breadth of
She's speaking.
challenges to consider as we move through today.
Okay.
Next up, we're going to have someone here to challenge us about how we think about the art market. So please a warm welcome to McConnell, founder of Authentify.
I feel this is unfair. They've got me on. I'm at 14 minutes and 44 seconds and haven't started. I love an audience. So thank you for this.
Sorry, come again?
This speech is rather personal for me. I've never had so much trouble actually completing a presentation. It's taken me 8 days until 3 o'clock in the morning. But I think it's very personal. I want to walk through. And the primary mission here is this notion of art, which is a moonshot. And I'm going to break down a couple things. I have a theater background, so of course I have to do it in 2 acts. I won't do interpretive dance, but and I don't really take this as an offensive way. I take it personally because I have a great passion for this industry. I'm a supply chain guy. My background, but art has always been my background. So why are we constantly failing to grow this market? So Act 2 is how do you fix the problems you identify?
We can't catch the mic. That's why we need
probably
the
don't
mic.
make sense of how I'm going to recommend.
I'm sorry.
But I want to start at the beginning, because this is an inspirational moment for me when I look at this. It's this notion of a moonshot. And most people know this when they know from SNL. The first part that says you choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, because it's hard. I don't have a great New accent. But what most people don't realize is this was 1962. It was actually 1969, July 16th.
Just because.
So that was 7 years later. Actually, not even 7 years later. But it was an incredible achievement. So, and I'm sorry, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bash the title of this conference. And I expect to be the first, not the third or fourth person. But 2050, when I first heard about this, but this was science fiction for me. And, I'm actually a science fiction buff, whether it's Arthur C. Clarke, Asimov, or others. From one standpoint, it's great to think because anything is possible. When you're talking about science fiction, anything could be good. But I think what we get from science fiction is this notion, you can predict it, the next generation will actually think it's a problem. And for anybody that was a Star Trek fan back in the 60s and 70s, the phones we use were predicted. Everything we do now in the tech field was predicted in some way. So I think if we can come up with a map of where we want to go, we can actually do it. So my team did this to me, and I don't know why they did. But my problem with 2050 was a couple things. One is when we talk about investment, I have yet to find an investor who thinks beyond 3 to 5 years to their own. So the notion that we're going anything beyond 5 years is insane. We can think maybe 10 years in advance, but those are 3 years from that standpoint. Our investors are long gone. And the second one is I'm going to be 80 years old, and I want to do stuff before then. That can be my legacy, but I have some achievements before I actually retire. So one of my biggest problems that we have out here, and it's conferences like this I love, so once again I'm not bashing it, but usually they don't have a clear objective of where you're trying to go. What are the actual goals here? So I think you have to challenge yourself. How much does your art market grow? And I have yet to hear anybody say get a number. I get a number every single day, and I could be wrong, but I don't care. I'm aiming for something. And who's going art and how much? Well, everybody should. We should challenge people. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we standing in front and pushing it forward? And the last one, this is somewhat controversial. People say, should it be a legitimate acting class? Maybe that's too commercial. Bullshit. It should. It should be. And it could be everything. We don't have to limit ourselves in how we look at it. If I thought there were limits, I would not come out of another place to come here. There we go. So let's go to Act 1. Let me keep failing.
Yeah.
I don't need to read this to you. I can.
This is backward. No, that's
Any industry, if that's what people think about when they first think about art, you are never going to grow. You're never going to succeed. People will not come to you. You have to protect your customer. You have to find ways to get away. And I like to do this. Anybody who's heard me speak before, you've probably heard a lot of these things, but I'm going to still repeat myself because I told you at least 3 times so people pay attention. So there are many markets that have exactly the same problems that we see in art. We need to look at those markets and solve them, and they're usually solved through innovation. sometimes tech, sometimes low tech, but they're always tech. So, you know, you can tell from my accent, I'm actually from originally, but
That sounds good in
but when we look at things, used cars, classic cars were really changed by a company called Carfax. And nobody who buys a used car would even think about doing it unless you knew about the history of that car, the products anyway. They changed everything and they what was the product. Every joke in the 1970s and early 80s, actually one of the biggest markets out there. Two, Bloomberg, most of you have heard about it, but they actually put real-time data for foreign exchanges, you know, in the 1980s, and it was unheard of. It changed the entire market, how it grew and grew. That's all that data. Real estate, you know, the younger people actually know what Zillow is, and the other ones may not know, but this was an opaque market that nobody really had a way to get into. It was completely transformed, for better or for worse, the way real estate, especially non-commercial real estate, is bought. And the last one, this is an older story. I live in Carlsbad, California. The GIA is 4 miles from my house. I didn't know that. But this was actually started in the 1930s. At the time, diamonds and gems, there were no standards. There were no set prices. People didn't know what to do. And from that time forward, you know, they came up with this crazy notion of the 4 C's. And if anybody's bought a diamond, you know what the 4 C's are. And if they ever received one, you know what they are too, so you can criticize what was bought for you. But the GIA changed it, and it was just about standards. So this is boring stuff, except for people like me. This is how you fundamentally move things forward. So this is, you know, you can see how I feel about some things, but healthy markets are really like healthy democracies. And when we think about them, there are really sort of 4 principles we have to think about a healthy market. You know, in this one, talking about governance, equality, liberty, and justice. And I think we have to admit to ourselves when we look at, you know, the art market, it is like a faltering democracy. We are not good. We're deficient, as I put up here, in most of these categories. But they're fixable. So let's talk about Act 2. How do we fix these problems? So when Andrew started talking first, I thought I'm in trouble because he's going to say everything that's in my speech when he talked about Moore's Law. But so I'm going to go one step further. His first name was Gordon Moore, and he was at Intel, and he came up with this in 1965. So we've learned something here. And he originally thought it was every year you were going to, you know, he was thinking in circuits, but it was basically doubling computing power every year, you know, going forward. And they thought that would end. And then they said, well, maybe it's not 1 year, it's 2 years. So 1975, I think they did new light things every 2 years. It's going to settle down to every 5 years. Well, it didn't. So it keeps going. The crazy thing about it is a technologist, like, given this, why the hell is the art world not benefiting from any of this? They have not. We need to find a way to fix it. So another thing, you know, I'm going to put straight away, you know, my good friend Elon Musk likes to talk about first principles as if he came up with first principles.
Yeah.
Right, this is, you know, all the way back to the Greeks here, this is Aristotelian.
Yeah.
But I think when we look at the art market, you have to break it down, and I've broken it down into 6 parts. I don't know why I like number 6, I just never get to 7. But when we look at the problems, you know, I broke it down and said, look, we don't have data standards, or at least, you know, general standards we can agree to. We don't really have a code of ethics. Well, it's a problem, and I love the last speech. We're talking about ethics. We should be talking about the front end, not trying to fix things afterwards. You know, transparency is a problem. And transparency doesn't mean everybody knows everything. Transparency is about knowing what's going on. It's about, you know, basically fixing symmetry of data. Asymmetry of data, we also the lectures on the history of economics, but, you know, basically, if the buyers and sellers don't know the same thing, they don't trust each other, you end up with markets as a race to the bottom. This notion of title, how are we in a market that doesn't actually manage title properly? This is insane. We must find a way to fix that. And the last is recourse. You know, this is, you know, the notion that people actually, I don't know, consumers could be protected, that there is some way of holding people accountable. The amount of times I've found people that have been arrested, have gone to jail, that pop up 3 years later in the news selling stuff again. I do not understand how this happens. It's insane. So I've broken it down to these 6 areas. Take a picture if you want. You know, I don't have enough time to talk them all through. But I like to put them in terms of people that understand what it means, not governance or access. These are very important themes that come out. Oh, you want to take a picture? Take a picture. You want those? So in May, I think it was, I was in New York, and I got some flack for calling it I think it was the 6 boring technologies that have completely transformed the art world. pure clickbait. But the whole idea here was, the technology already exists. We don't have to invent the base. It's almost like the AI models. And we're not inventing AI, we're finding ways to apply it. We're finding ways to use it. And whether it be pulled from other industries or sort of looking here, we put together a model and we'll all beat it up because I took that whole 4 seasons and what we call it the 8 days of art. Maybe we can find a way to organize that. And I threw on here some of the technologies that we talked about the last time, whether it be AI or cryptography or blockchain or IoT, 5G, RFID. Well, that's what I talked about. But the notion is it's already here, so the problem isn't about the technology, it's not about the structure, it's something
by the way. I have
so,
just started
clearly, visual cues here, like, are we going extinct? What's the problem? Why are we not catching up as an industry? Where do we look? And I think that's a sunset. But here's my theory. The art industry, he's quite dreamy, but he's a historian, right? And historians tend to look in the past, they don't look forward. Anytime Indiana Jones shows up, I feel good about my presentation. So thank you, I'm done. But one of the things we learned in tech, and I came from another industry and came into this one, is the people that are usually the fastest to adopt technology are criminals. And there's another industry, anybody know what the other industry is? It's the porn industry. So porn is really good at adopting technology very quickly. You don't have to look there to find out what they're doing, but that's always a good indicator of how to take advantage of it. So the second thing you have to look is, number 2 is if you're not embracing technology, in essence, the criminals ahead of you, you're going to be taking advantage of. You're not protecting the customer, so why would people want to play? And and the last thing here, and we have to see this in the art world, the only people that can afford it if you're not investing in it is rich people. So basically, only the people at the very top that can afford to protect themselves. This is why you never grow. So there's a notion here, you can use a different word. I like to use the word utilities, whether it be a public utility, public grid companies. There's a lot of us out there that are trying to build what amounts to infrastructure. And I think if you don't invest in this fundamental infrastructure that all these other industries have, you're never going to grow. Here we go. So I've given a couple ideas of utilities. Some companies already exist trying to do this. Some perhaps are new. But this notion of whether it be tokenization companies for ID, or title registries, or forensic labs, passports or customs, rare documents, KYC, escrow, these sorts of things should exist but don't really exist across the board. The other thing here that they're not necessarily companies, but it was great in the last speech we talked about this notion of governance. And I think we can all agree it's self-regulation. We're going across so many different countries, so many places, but there really isn't any sense of government here. We don't even have standard contracts, which drives me insane. When you look at, whether it's identification, APIs, reports, once again, they're not the same, they're not consistent. It's very hard to operate in this industry without consistency. And ethics, I think this is why the humanities have to come back, because when you're working in the tech world, they have no idea what you're talking about. And the notion they're trying to play catch up because they're behaving like criminals, like there are no rules. We have to lead with it. We have to set up guidelines. We have to make the way so there are actual guardrails to not have to fix it and solve the problems before they happen. I know it sounds a bit preachy, so I'll get funny. So Act 3. So Act 3 is like, how do we get this done? And for me, I've tried to explain to people how it feels to be a technologist in the art world, and this is how it feels. And they say, now build a high-speed rail. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? It's Roman ruins. I cannot do this. We have to find a way to put better infrastructure in to make this possible. So what makes it hard? I feel like I'm bashing everybody here, but infrastructure is not sexy. I dress up, I usually wear black and jeans, but I dressed up for you to try and make it look sexier here. But we're geeks and nerds, right? Like, we love this stuff. We think it's really cool, but it's not that exciting for the rest of the industry. And the other problem it runs into is we have a long arc, often beyond the 3 to 5 years, because we're thinking about, infrastructure takes time to build. You have to think it out. It requires significant investment. And the last thing here is the ROI on a lot of this is not exponential. There may be a hockey stick as you get more adoption, but it's not exponential. It basically grows as the market grows. But it's essential. We have to think about this differently. So, and the last one you all know, it's kind of like the IT joke here, but it's like nobody notices when it works, they only get crazy nuts when it doesn't work. And this is another thing you have to think about, like you have to invest in it so it actually works. And I can guarantee, and I know there's economists here, and I've talked to before, there's never been a market that has grown to scale without this kind of infrastructure. It just doesn't happen. Okay, so why is a moonshot important? I think there are 3 points here. There's probably more to it than this, but this notion, number one, is capital. If we're going to do something that's seemingly impossible in a short period of time, remember, I think it should be, let's say 2030, maybe 2035, we need capital, and we need it to come from somewhere. Number two, we need common goals. We need to agree where we're going. This notion that we all have to invent something differently, it's insane. You know, we need to go together. We don't have to compete all the time. And that's number three. There is so much to grow into. Collaboration is key. And I was amazed when I looked at this industry that nobody was really collaborating the way I thought they should. Once again, on the supply chain side of many companies, we all got along. We were friends. We would go to conferences. We would drink together. We dreamed up solutions because we were not strategic to the company. We were just poor. And that's how we have to think about a lot of this industry. There's a lot of it just poor. We can all benefit from it, so we have to work together. So I'm going to go back to number one, and this is I agree it's too long, but this was an asset administrator who'd been there for 42 years, and he basically broke it down. So it's money, it's money, it's money, and if you're counting on politicians, they'll back away and not get to your money. So the key thing is the engineering is not the problem. Solving the problems that seem impossible, that's not the problem. The problem is the commitment to the money to get where you want to go. So who's going to pay for it? And I think it's going to come probably in three ways. But number one, the insiders in the industry, whether it be insurance companies or banks or big galleries or dealers, they need to invest in their own future. Otherwise, there won't be one. And they don't have to invest individually because, once again, this isn't necessarily strategic, right? This is a general investment in the overall infrastructure of the industry. So when we look at that, you know, whether it be consortiums or whether it be investment funds or private ventures, like there's a way to do this, but they have to be committed in that way. And the thing that goes hand in hand with this, and I know this because of the investors I've talked to, is that outsiders, when they see an industry committed to where they're going and define what the goals are, will participate because they know they're going to be successful. There is money, there are users. Instead, we run around trying to justify doing the most obvious thing for an industry, and people say, will they buy it? Are you kidding me? Of course they should buy it, but we need to have them come out and say it and commit to it. So this is where I get bold, and I'm going to get even bolder by the end. But I think you just have to go just like JFK did back in 1962 and think, you know, why do you think by 2030 we're a $100 billion market? We're somewhere between 50 and 70 now. Why not 100? I don't see any reason why we couldn't get there, so we should go. And second, why not double it again? And I'm going to give you Moore's Law. Turns out they thought it would be every 5 years after it was 2 years. So 5 years, let's double it again. Is there a reason why we shouldn't? And I don't think there is. If you look at the turnover of the market, you assume $3 trillion assets, you're at 1.8%
Sorry,
turnover.
what?
There's
No
reason
questions
to
for
make
next
it.
panel because
So let's do it. Right.
their time.
Second thing, you know, who should own art and how much? 10 to 15%. You know, fight me. I think it's a logical number. Put it out there. You know, we've seen Deloitte say anywhere from 8 to 12 or maybe as far as 15. If we're doing our job, this is a reasonable number. Put it out there. That's our goal. Number two, get it shifted from an asset class. It's always this sort of notion, alternative, and maybe, is it really a true, legitimate asset class? Of course it is. It should be a common asset class. It's the one that's been around for the longest ever. Let's agree to that and move it forward. And the last thing is, and I think this is reasonable, and there are tools to make this possible, is how do you make this liquid as real estate? That's not that much of a stretch. So how do we get there? Okay, so, you know, thank you from the last panel. Collaboration. That's number 3 out here. So number one, technology has to be fully integrated because none of you who are non-technologists want to talk to your IT department because they're annoying. And having to do a new integration every single time, even I as a technologist, so you have to come up with standards to make it easy. Standards, how about that? If we actually had standards and we follow them, it makes it even easier, down to the idea that an item, a work of art, is a standard way of communicating. There's a company called, or a group called AIS that's represented here. It's a way to do literally identification for art. This should have existed decades ago. 3, we need to work towards a common goal. we're spending a disproportionate amount of time on marketing when we should just be working on developing the products that everybody needs. Competition should never be toxic. You will always find toxic companies. They must be pushed out of the way. You know, they are a race to the bottom. They will never move us in the right direction. You have to stop accepting them because they're low bidding. Stop. And I think this is one thing, and I apologize to Andrew at the beginning, I think there's a risk for infrastructure companies having a conflict of interest. This notion that you're owning the data and you're also participating in the buy-sell is dangerous. It's a problem. There's enough money to be made for the infrastructure companies to not participate in it. Because somebody has to have trust in data. If you're going to trust our data, we can't be competing with you on the buy-sell side. So I think the value-added services have to think about that way, and then all the marketplaces have to think it. That's how markets work properly. The S&P is not doing the buy-sell, they're actually just managing all the transactions. And the last thing here, this is just a bunch of people I'm working with. This is not to be exclusive, but we just got together a bunch of companies. We were working together loosely, and we just gave ourselves a quick name, a logo here, the Art Market Solutions Group. Don't care. But you know, we have a whole bunch of tables out there. It's like, why don't we work together and talk together and hand clients back and forth to each other and move things forward? You know, Annika's looking at me, it's like, how am I didn't even know the name of this thing. Because we're moving fast and we're breaking stuff. So the last thing I just want to think, and I know I'm early in the bit here, but when we talk about a conference, like we can beat up the name, we can think about things, but I really want to think about the legacy of this. And from a technology, a lot of people are sort of technology for technology's sake, you know, sort of like, I'm an AI. It's like, but what problem are you solving? I think we're solving real problems, so I think we need to move away. That's not why we're doing this. Is it to grow the art market? Yeah, but I think that's sort of a benefit of where we're going. And the last one, of course, I've loaded this deck, you know, apologies, but you know, I think it's collaborating to make the art market worthy of art, you know, its creators and its patrons. And I try to be more inclusive in that because often, you know, artists get left off this and they're on panels, but we sort of forget about them. But I think when you think about it holistically, the whole market moves, and that's how it gets bigger. So, you know, you can read along with me. You know, I know JFK, but when I thought about this, and if you want to do a moonshot, I don't know who can give the speech. They can give their own one. But I was thinking about this last night, and I thought, you know, wouldn't it be nice if somebody could come up and say, well, maybe we change it later or something. But the idea is, you know, and I was ripping off JFK at the beginning. I just said, you know, we'll make the fine art the next great asset class by 2035. Chose the date, and not because it's easy, because it's hard. And I said, we'll elevate art, something we love, to the highest standards. And I think that's really important. Make the art market represent our values, to be shared and appreciated by all of humanity. Make it accessible to all people, and stand up to the creators, historians, the professionals and experts who make this industry and market so incredible. And we'll also protect the industry from the corrupting influences that try to undermine the values of the very art and culture we so cherish. That's all I have. Special thanks to Devin, who works with me, and I'm a pain in the ass to work with, and she's managed me, so thank you, Devin.
Thank you.
Oh, no.